Okay, so now we're going to go on to session 4 for week 1. And then we're going to focus now, now that we've had a chance to look at the various, had an introduction about why is it that, interpreting and why this training is needed, giving you a little bit of background about healthcare interpreting. We also talked about, guiding the process, about the different stages of the interpreting process and what's needed in module 2. You've also, had a little bit of discussion about site translation and as well as the CHIA standards. So now, for skill building, we want to look at additional skills that interpreters need to have in order to make their job a little bit easier. So, we know that as interpreters, one of the biggest things of it, the skill that we need to have is we need to build our memory capacity. So in this module, we focus on identifying strategies that will assist you as interpreters and how to retain that information long enough for me to be able to hear it, process it, convert it, and then relay it over to the provider or to the client or the patient, in this case in the healthcare setting. So there are different ways to do that, and we'll kind of go over that in a little bit. But more than important, what are those strategies? And again, each person is very unique, and you will have different strategies, and I encourage you to try different ones, because again, different situations will have to, you'll have to adapt based on that. And the more strategies and the more skills that you acquire, the better off you'll be. And in general, like I said, we all have different ways of encoding information, processing information. So again, you will have to figure out what is the best strategy for you that works best in your situation. And again, it's not a cookie cutter that each one is going to fit for everybody. That's why we have a numerous of them so that you can go ahead and pick the one that you feel is going to be most adapted to you. We're also going to talk about, in conjunction to strategies and how do I keep the information. Again, another tip for that is, note-taking. We talked about it earlier, that, a couple of you guys mentioned, I think Christy and Darlene says, can I take notes? Absolutely. Anything that's going to help you retain the information long enough for you to be able to recall it accurately and completely, we want you to incorporate that. And actually, that's part of your tools as an interpreter. Think about it, for example, when you are a construction worker. They have a utility belt, right? Again, so figuratively, interpreters also carry their utility belt. What do we put in that utility belt? We need to have, you can use your cell phone for, for an app to look up vocabulary, a word that you don't know. I would, look at apps that have anatomy if I have to look up a body part really quickly. I would also, there's also a lot of online items in terms of note-taking apps that you can use on your phone or a tablet, because a lot of people bring those, with them to their encounter, because we're in the technology age now. Definitely you have to have, I'm old school. I always say bring a note of paper or a pad and a pencil or a pen, whatever you feel, again, to be able to help you write those notes. But just make aware that, people can get a little bit hesitant or a little bit kind of put off, like, what is that? Why are you writing down my information? Again, reassure them that, that it's only for the session in itself. It's for note-taking to help you retain the information, long enough for you to be able to repeat it, because you want to be accurate and complete, and that they will be destroyed at the end. And we'll talk about that. And then again, how do we take the information that we are hearing, seeing, and get encoded in ways that make sense to us? Because if we sit there and write everything out, every sentence, if if your goal is to sit there and write a sentence, by the time you're on word 3, you've already missed 4 or 5 things that came afterwards, especially if somebody who's speaking fast, you're not going to be able to keep up. So using shorthand, strategies is also part of note-taking, because you want to shorten those words just enough where, it's a first letter or a symbol, something that's just going to help trigger your memory of what was that doctor talking about? What was that patient talking about? What was that, what was it referred to? What am I associating that symbol or that word with? So, again, that takes practice and building up your own ability to take those shorthand, taking skills. And again, this is just, an introduction for you guys. Definitely encourage you guys to be able to just take it on. There's a lot of, useful online courses that you can take for memory development, note-taking strategies. I encourage you, if you're going to pursue this as a career, to really invest and hone in that skill, because we only have, maybe half an hour to go over this with you. But again, it's something that's a work in progress, and you have to build up on that. You're not going to learn it in one module by me sitting here and just giving you some strategies. So I'm just going to give you some strategies of how to do that, and just kind of demonstrate how you can slowly build up on that. But then it's up to you guys to be able to take it to the next level and how to perfect that skill even further. Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and start the slideshow here for this session. Oh, okay, so I clicked the wrong one. You see my technology skills are not up to par here, so I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward real quick to the section that I need to kind of go to on my PowerPoint here. Okay, so very good. All right, so I already talked about that. So these are the objectives for this session. So when we talk about memory, there are different types of memory that we have to work with as individuals. So for the most part, we have what's called sensory memory, which is basically how the information comes in, right? And this is very short term. So basically, we see an object, it comes into our brain, we process it for a couple minutes, and then we have to figure out where do we send that information, what system or what part of, are we going to go, what department is it going to go to, for a better lack of a word, for that information to be registered so that I can use it maybe for long-term memory. The good thing is for interpreters, we don't have to store things in long-term because we only need it for the moment the session is there. In the moment, once the session is over, the patient starts talking or whatever, then we don't have to remember that information anymore, which is the good part, right? So, but how do we, what strategies do we use to hold on to that info so that we don't lose anything and we don't become like that video that we saw earlier in which the information was too long and she just missed everything and only did a little summary of what was there. That is what you don't want to do. So again, the different types of sensory registers that we have as individuals, all information handle goes through that path. And then from this delivered, and again, and these are either your hearing, your sight, or your touch. That's how our brain encodes the information around us in our environment. So again, each one requires a different skill set. So besides sensory memory, we also have working memory, also known as short-term memory, which is what interpreters actually will be utilizing in the field. Again, you don't want to, encode things for long term. You want to do it for the moment in time. It's real time, enough to be able to convey it, and all that's it. And then, of course, we have the long-term memory, right? In the sense. And again, long-term memory stores things for large capacity of information for our lifespan, basically. We're building long-term memory, as we go along. So again, we make that conscious effort to put it into memory by developing strategies to put it there. So basically, long-term memory is divided into two subcategories: declarative memory and non-declarative memory. Okay, maybe too much information, but I just want to give you that context. So declarative memory primarily is information that we put into words. Like when you declare something, you say it and you verbalize it. So again, here, again, we divide those into two categories as well, or two types: semantic memory or episodic memory. Okay, and semantic basically is just general knowledge information. What is the capital of California? What street is X, Y, and Z? What are the ingredients in? Again, it's a list of information that you would have to acquire, and then maybe you will need it in the future, right, to recall that information. And again, that's mostly related to learning. So we read a book, that's semantic memory. We have to memorize that because we have an exam later on, so I need to know the details of that, of that information. So again, that's different ways of encoding information. And then the other type is, like I said, episodic memory. And again, these are our life experiences, things that we encounter on a daily basis. And again, this basically answers the question of the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, right? For example, where did I go on vacation last year? Again, once I've encoded the information, I ask myself that question and I can relive, oh yeah, I went to Paris with my friend, because it was our 40-year anniversary, whatever it was. And then those memories kind of flood back and you're able to pick just by that one question, it's already stored and you're able to access that information. Or like, when did my cousin get married? When is my anniversary? When is mom's birthday? All those things are episodic because again, we tie the emotion, the feeling to that episode. And then that kind of triggers us and helps us remember that information when we have to bring it to the forefront. Okay. So again, a little bit of background in terms of how we as individuals code information, how we store it in this brain of ours. And again, the main thing is how do we keep that information organized so that we can access it when we need it, which is what happens a lot of times when we create chaos, right? Things get kind of cluttered and, if we don't organize it, it's gonna be harder for us to retrieve it when we actually need it and we, to utilize it. So what are some tips to help maintain and improve our memory? There are many of them. You can go on internet and you can see, a ton of information related to this. But the main points here is for us as interpreters to keep in mind is, again, our brain is a muscle, okay? And like they said, you've always heard it in school, whatever, if you don't use it, you lose it. Okay, so the one advantage of interpreters is that they're constantly utilizing, if you work on this on a daily basis, you're constantly working that memory every single day, right? So again, so we have to exercise it. And how do we do that? by, actively mentally stimulating activities on a daily basis. And studies have shown and research has shown that when you mentally stimulate the brain, it actually buffers or delays memory loss. Because again, you're using those neurons, right, to transmit the information, and there's less chance, or it takes longer for those to deteriorate. When the neurons don't snap or the synapses are making that connection, is because they've been stagnant, they've been pretty steady for a while, and they forget to make those connections. But if you have them constantly moving, they remember how to make those connections and remember those activities, those memories that we have put there. So again, the more we do mental activities, that builds up reserves in our brain that delays our cognitive decline. You see that in, Alzheimer's patients, Parkinson's patients, so dementia patients. And again, it's very well studied, and it's seen there's different ways to kind of delay or, and even diminish that at all. There's one day they're hoping to find a cure for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, is to get it early enough so we don't get to that point where now this person no longer remembers, who they are, who their families are, which is very sad to see when you're, when you're in that situation. So again, really encouraging you to do different activities, right? The most common things, think about that. What are some activities that people do or you've heard about that people utilize to exercise their brain? Take a moment and think about that. What are some of those activities that you can do on a daily basis to keep your mind agile, to keep your mind, constantly working, per se? There has to be time for rest, but again, the more you stimulate it, the more, think about when you exercise, right? When you exercise on a regular basis, your body feels good. You feel more energy, you feel, you're light on your feet, you can move faster, your flexibility is there. What happens when you don't go to the gym for a week? When you've been going consistently and you take off a week, your body feels it. Same thing with your brain. So again, if we let the brain get kind of lax, you're going to feel it and you're going to be sluggish and you're not going to be able to be sharp as you were maybe a while back. So definitely encourage that. So again, anything that motivates, crossword puzzles, Sudokus, learn to play a new instrument, reading the newspaper, anything, that either exercise or that stimulates, brings oxygen to the brain, all good for to delay the cognitive decline in our brains. Okay, so think about that. You utilize on a daily basis. As interpreters, like I said, if you're working, you're constantly utilizing those parts of your brain, so you're going to buffer that delay. The other thing that that has been proven to kind of slow down or improve our memory is, again, decreasing the factors that make it harder for us to focus and concentrate, right? Because it's been noted as well that stress and anxiety interfere with memory and concentration. Why is that, right? When we are stressed, when we are anxious, our body, our body is a very well organized system, right? Our brain is our executive functioning, so it takes a lot of energy. So when we are stressed, again, our heart rate goes up. So when the brain gets that signal that our heart rate is racing a little bit more because I'm getting nervous, I'm getting anxious, because you know what, I don't recall, that our brain is gonna, is very quick to it, that it's gonna start shutting down what takes the most energy, in this case, meaning our cognitive processes, right? Because it has to focus on bringing oxygen to our vital organs so that we don't pass out or die, because that's where the attention is needed in the moment when we're anxious and we're stressed. So if that attention goes down, again, so our concentration up here is not there. So if somebody tells me something when I'm anxious or I'm stressed, basically it's not encoding, it's not going into my sensors, because my body is focusing on my energies now on keeping my respiration, bringing my blood pressure down a little bit, because again, it doesn't want me to go into, overload, because I'm not controlling my body effectively. So again, if we can reduce those different things that produce a stress, then that's going to help us think more clearly and be able to focus more, a little bit better when we're in the session in itself. So I ask you, what are some of the things that can cause stress for an interpreter? Think about that. When you've done interpreting, what has, when they say, okay, medium, I need you to please, can you please come in here and help me interpret for this patient? You're like, oh my God, okay, give me a second. What is that moment like? What is it that makes you anxious or nervous about going in there and doing that, right? Think about that. What are some of the things that, into your mind, and kind of tell that to yourself? Okay, so yeah, so for what we've heard in the past, again, for interpreters, and you guys mentioned it when you did your introduction, is terminology, okay? Oh, shoot, I don't know that word. Oh my Lord, the patient is speaking too long. I'm gonna forget that. All that produces stress, not being prepared for the session, right? And even before that, when we talk about the pre-session, when we said, when you are stuck in, when you don't plan it accordingly and you're running late, you're stressed because you're looking at the clock. Oh, I'm gonna be late. My appointment was at 10. It's already 9:45 and my GPS tells me that it's still 20 minutes away, right? So again, all that anxiety is building up. So your brain is already on fight or flight mode, right? Because again, you're worried about the traffic, you're worried about getting there. Now I have to find parking, I have to find the floor, I have to find a provider, I have to do my pre-session. All these things are going through your mind. So the more time you give yourself, so I always say, plan ahead, look at your GPS, map it out, know what time of the day it is, how bad is traffic, especially in LA. You can decrease some of those anxiety provoking moments so that when you get to, if you arrive on time, if, we say you have to get there at least 15 to 10 minutes before your appointment. Because if you get there right at the appointment time, you are already late and your body doesn't have time to decompress a little bit, take a deep breath, and then be ready to go and start your session. So again, all this can produce stress, right? If the night before you were a busy bee because you have a family, you have kids, you didn't get a good night's sleep, your body's going to feel it the next day. So whenever you have an appointment, we always encourage you guys, make sure you get, you eat well, right? You get a good night's sleep so that in the morning you are at your optimum, to be able to put your best foot forward for the day. Same thing in the morning, get up, start your day early, don't be rushed, get something to eat. That's the other thing, right? If you're hungry, your body's going to be, telling you, feed me, your energy level is going to go down. So again, when your energy level goes down, you're not focused, you're not concentrating because your body's focused on the fact that, that you're having this physical hunger pains that and that's going to be a distraction for you. You're not going to be able to concentrate. So these are, two things that are crucial for interpreters to focus on and be aware of more than anything, because these two things will impact your ability to recall things or your ability to learn or to encode information that you will need in the moment to be able to do that. Other than that, you can learn different strategies that are going to help boost, your ability to recall the information. Once you've dealt with this, then now you're in the session. Now I can utilize different tools and tricks to help me, remember certain details that I have to do that. But at least here, I'm in a, even state of mind. I'm calm. I can focus. My mind can actually focus on the information that is not going to come at me from both the patient and the provider. Okay, make sense? All right. So we're going to go on now to look about, okay, so now we know that if we exercise our brain, it's going to stay healthy. We're going to be able to remember a little bit better. But again, we still need a little bit of help. Okay, so how do we improve our ability to retain 2, 3, 4 sentences? Because that's my goal, right? When I first start off, 1 sentence at a time, if that's what I need, then okay, 1 full thought, I pause you, and then I interpret. And my goal is to be able to increase that capacity to 2 sentences, maybe up to 3, or even maybe 4, because some people have very good retention. So that's something to build up on. Don't stress out about it if I can't remember 3 sentences on the first day. But I'm going to definitely make an effort to get myself there. It's something that I want to work towards, right? So one way to do that again is looking at strategies that are going to help me remember. Okay, so there are numerous tricks out there that help us, that help aid our memory. The most 4 common ones, like I said, one, when we hear a lot of information, we have a tendency to want to remember everything, right? So again, we want to be able to choose only the specific details that we want to remember for the information. And you'll be surprised how our brain fills in those other gaps, okay? And let me tell you what I'm talking about, okay? So trying to remember everything will overload your brain. Basically, just like your computer. When you add so many files, there comes a point when it reaches its max and it won't take any more. So that's what we talk about there. So again, so as interpreters, don't stress yourself. Don't let it go too long or too much. Again, focus on the key information. And avoid remembering trivial information or irrelevant information, filler words that we utilize, okay? So when we talk about when we were kids in school, one of the little strategies that we learned very, very on, again, it's that, that whole little strategy of the who, the what, the where, the episodic memory to help us remember a story. Same thing here. Okay, patient, when is it hurt? What part of the body? How long has it been hurting? What is the patient taking? How many medications were there? So again, those are key things. I don't have the and, back when I was, I don't have to remember that part, but again, my brain will complete the story once I have it. Once I have all the main elements, I can bring those together by other strategies. But again, just focusing on the key things will bring the story together. I'm not saying to forget everything else, but just bring those key elements back and you put them into the story, okay? And then most important, you want to create a system. Like I said before, if all the information, there is no organization, think about your environment. When things are disorganized, it's harder to find information or find what you're looking for. Same thing with our brain. We have to have the information organized and create a system of reminders or cues that are going to help you remember that information, okay? And I'm sure you probably heard of a lot of these, or maybe you already utilize them on a daily basis, okay? So again, think about what are those systems that you use to organize information. So again, one way to do that is, again, when we have a lot of information, we might be able to chunk it together, right? Into smaller bits of information or things that are common, we might put them together. That helps. It makes it a little bit easier than to, for example, a string of letters. If I can find a commonality between them or break them up into little sections, maybe 2-3 letters are easier to remember than to remember 20 letters. So again, it's chunking that information together to make it in smaller bites so that I can remember it a little bit easier. So, by doing that, again, and also using mnemonics. I don't know, I'm sure if you're aware of those. Mnemonics, again, creating these little cues or systems, little acronyms that will help associate with information that will do that with me. People have information, for example, when you read, people highlight. That is a strategy, right? That's going to help you highlight, or the highlighter that you utilize basically, just focuses on what you identified as the key information that you want to recall. And when you're doing a paragraph, you're not going to highlight the whole paragraph. You're only going to highlight the most important things, right? You're creating a system of how you organize that information and remember it. So there, I wish I would have had the money back in the day when, somebody had this frank idea of developing these little color-coded little square pieces of paper that we call Post-its. What do we utilize them, right? We write things down, they're color-coded, we post it on our fridge, on our computer screen. It's a reminder that tells us, oh, I have an appointment at this time. Oh, I need to take out the loaf from the oven. Whatever it is, because we're distracted, and that's a visual cue for us to go back and get that information, okay? So again, creating the system there. And when you go to the grocery store, you create a list, right? And how do you categorize that? It's up to you. You might put alphabetical order. You might put it in groups, like I said, chunking of information. You might go by aisles. You might go by need. Again, whatever works for you. Remember, create your own system that's going to help you, and it's very unique to you because each of us learns very differently. Like I said, some of us are visual learners. Some of us are auditory learners. We hear it and we're good. Other people, like myself, have to see it. I have to see it, touch it. Just by hearing it, it's harder for me to memorize it. I have to have a visual cue to go with it. So again, remember those different strategies that will help you. Write a note down. You've always heard people make fun of it, tie a string to your finger, right? Is another strategy. But again, remember what that string is for. Because if you can't remember what the string is for, then that strategy is no good for you, right? So it's only good as how you associate the information with that. So again, organization is very important. Creating that system is very important. Because I always talked that before, coming to Pals for Health, I used to work as a behavioral therapist for a brain injury rehab facility. And with people that suffer brain injuries, and one of the biggest things that they had was memory issues, right? So we talked about it, when, say you're, going on in your car, you're in a car accident, you bump your head, and now you're having trouble remembering information. So the way that we made it, how we can simplify it for a patient was like, okay, well, I can't remember that. I lost my memory. No, you didn't lose your memory. You just don't have the capacity to retrieve everything that's here because right now it's disorganized because of the head injury, right? Now there's swelling in there, and now you can't get to that place, that system where it's organized, that register where it's at, where it's stored. We have to find a different way to get there, okay? So I said, the analogy that I always use with that is like, think of a file cabinet, okay? Has drawers, right? And within those drawers, you pull it out and there's, you have the ability to put folders in there. And then you alphabetize, you put names, you put dates, however way you want to organize that information. And then as you go along, you just put those files in there, right? Wherever it corresponds. Think about it, with a head injury, somebody toppled over that file cabinet. All the file doors came open and all the papers now are scattered on the floor. And so now I have to go back and find an invoice for November of whatever date. I have to search through everything. There's no system there for me to now actually open the drawer and go to November and pull it out. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, is creating that, you know, it's not that it's gone, it's just how do we organize it so it makes it easier for us to remember it or to get to it when we need it. So that's where the strategies come in, right? So we have to know, like I said, how do we put it in order that it makes, you know, attention and we're able to access it. So again, it's pay attention and be an active learner, right? You have to make an active process of doing it and focus on new information and minimize distractions. Okay, makes sense, right? So, you know, again, those different things are going to help you be a little bit more sharp and be able to acquire that information a little bit easier. Okay. So again, think of what those strategies are for you. Like I said, repeating things that we know through your head or whatever that may be, great. You know, you have that ability, do it. Repetition is always one way to do it. But again, you have to think about it. You have to have other tools in your tool belt, because sometimes the provider may get a little bit annoyed having to ask them 5 times to repeat the same information again. So we have to make that, you know, that conscious effort to find other ways of writing the information down, associating it, making a mental picture, whatever I need to do to help me so I don't have to be asking the doctor or the patient to repeat over and over the same thing. So that's part of our responsibility as interpreters is, okay, now I need to develop a strategy that's more effective for me so that I can write it down or I can visually use it so I can go ahead and repeat it now and be accurate and complete. Okay? So with that said, so we're gonna do a little exercise. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this for a second here. And I'm gonna go ahead and share another thing for you guys. So I'm gonna give you guys a list of words, and I want you, you know, your goal is to remember these words. So I'm gonna have you look at it for about, you know, it says 30 seconds, but we're gonna take a little bit less than that. I'm gonna have you look at it. And again, the only thing, and I want you guys to be honest with me, again, you have to look at the list and I want you to utilize the strategy. You can't write it down. That's the only thing that you cannot do, okay? You can repeat it to yourself, you can associate them, you can put them in groups in your head. Don't write anything down. And again, and this is again, it's testing you to be able to expand your capacity to remember information. Because if you're writing it down and you go back and look at it, then that's not gonna work. You're cheating at it. So this is not the purpose of this exercise. So I really want you to be honest and really try this without actually cheating and writing it down, and challenge yourself and see if you can remember those words. And again, we'll go back and say, what made it, what strategy did you use to help you remember that? Because that's something you want to utilize when you're out in the field. Okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put this up. And I'm gonna go ahead and share this with you guys. Let's see here. Go back here real quick. Let's get out of this one. And then minimize here. You bear with me real quick. And I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you guys again. Okay. All right, so again, this is the list of words that I want you to share, okay? So you're gonna go ahead and look at this list of words on there, and then I'm gonna give you guys 30 seconds. Read them, repeat them in your head, visualize them, whatever strategy you want to utilize, because I'm going to ask you to repeat those words and write down how many words you were able to remember in 30 seconds, okay? So go ahead and go. Okay, 15 seconds. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. So going back, now think about, like I said, you didn't cheat, no writing it down. So go back and tell me, try to write down, take a piece of paper and write down how many words you remember from that list that I just showed you a little while ago, a couple seconds ago. I'll give you a couple minutes to write those down, okay? Okay. All right. So again, let's see, how many words we remembered, right? We had a list of, 16 words that were there, right? And again, how many did you get remembered off the top of your head? Did you remember 5? Did you remember 10, 12, 14, or all 16? So again, and what strategy did you utilize to remember those? So again, you only had a visual cue, right? That's it. So again, we're using a different part of our brain to remember that information. So sometimes you will be in an appointment where you'll have, again, the information is being said, you're seeing a paper, and then you're asked to remember it. So again, what strategies are we utilizing for that? Okay, so we have to make sure we do that. All right. So we're going to go ahead and now move on to the next one. So keep on that list. I'm going to ask you guys later on to recall that, maybe when we do the session on Friday, I might ask you guys who remembers that list of words that I gave you guys. And I'm going to give you a couple more, exercises later on to test that memory capacity in between, when we're working on that. Okay. So let's see here. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay. So we talked about, like I said, note-taking strategies are important. We need to go ahead and, again, develop those strategies. So for this last exercise, I tell you, okay, you can't write it down. Just use any other visual aid to help you with that. Again, some interpreters use finger counting as an aid, as a way to do that. Other people create a mental picture or visualize it, a scene. Maybe you put those words in a little sentence or a story that would make you connect the words, right? Or you create a rhyme. Maybe you rhyme the words together that were on that list. Or maybe you associated those words with something. Okay, well, I have a red. Oh, my favorite red hat, or my favorite red shirt. My favorite color is red. As you can see, I'm wearing a red shirt today. So again, you associate past information with new information. Again, that associating those two, because remember, you have your long-term memory, and we pair it with the new one, it's easier for us to retrieve it. So again, develop these, things. Like I said, the only strategy we didn't do in this case was have you take those notes, right? Because again, we're trying to have you utilize and expand your brain and not always have to rely on writing things down. Because there might be a time when you don't have a pen with you and you don't want to be fumbling through your purse. Oh my God, I forget. That's part of the pre-planning, right? I have to make sure I have a pen or a couple of pens in case one runs out or stops working for whatever reason. I always need to have that scratch piece of paper, that notebook, in there with me, or something to write with. Okay, so that's part of the prep work. Okay. So again, we talked about, like I said, mnemonics are really good. As remembering, like say, take the first letter of each one, create a new word, and you associate that, right, with that mnemonic as a way to remember the information. For example, another one that we have, for example, we're going to give you guys a list of words, right? I'm going to give you a list of letters. I'm going to have you, listen to it, right, and then put them together, chunk them together. Okay. For example, and this one actually you can write it down, okay? So here's my list of words for you. So it's C, I, A, F, B, I, K, G, B, D, N, A, B, B, C, U, K, C, N, N, U, S-A. Okay, so a series of letters that I need you to recall back to me. Okay, so again, what strategy can I utilize to help me remember all those letters? So you're looking at over, 15 letters here, or 25 letters that I'm giving you guys to remember, right? That you have to recall. So again, so remember we talked about chunking, right? What if I combined those letters there that I have? Taking that same group of letters, right? Now I have, what if I give you the words CIA, FBI, KGB, DNA, BBC, UK, CNN, USA. Same string of letters, but now I've chunked them together to form another word, or easier to remember that little acronym, right? That might be a little bit easier to remember. That's how I chunk them together. And I could even go even further, right? If I'm going to remember those same letters that I gave you in the first time, now I can create a story about that. When we talked about create a story or a rhyme in your head, right? So I have now the CIA, FBI, and the KGB are all searching for the spy's DNA. The story is reported on the BBC in the UK and CNN in the USA. See how I put those chunked words together in a story? That story now is easier for me to recall than that straight string of letters. So again, it's a memory strategy that I want to utilize. So again, how do I chunk that information? And again, it's not going to happen on the spot. I have to be something that I have to actively do, and strategies that I have to use on a daily basis so that they are ready there, and I've honed in that skill to be able to do that. Okay. So again, another strategy that we can utilize to help us remember the information. Okay, so let's call it, say, chunking. And again, you know, you want to be able to link things with new information, visual cues, all that information helps as well. When you're with the patients, you know, when they're telling the story, visualize that the anatomy of the body. If they're talking about their back pain, think about the video that we saw. Can you remember the man talking about what part of his body hurt? Where was he at when he fell? When that, you know, his friend fell from the tree, and what was he doing? You can actually visualize that to help you remember, right? That he laid there dead, and that's how he got hurt. Right? So again, you can visualize that. You can probably visualize right now, going back to that video, you can visualize where that interpreter was sitting, where you know, what they were doing, what was in the background if you were paying attention to that. So again, all those are memory aids that help you. But again, we have to be an active person, right? We have to intentfully look for the details and encode them in order for us to be able to remember them. Because many times we see something, and if we don't pay attention to it, we're not going to remember the details. So again, that's part of the process of actually, you know, memory strategies as well. Okay. So again, think about, there's numerous strategies out there that you can utilize. Obviously, number one, you can always do is note taking. But when you're doing, you have to really fortify the other parts of the brain, the visual memory, right? The association, the stories. You can always ask for repetition. That's a given. Again, you know, because again, your goal is to be accurate and complete. But in situations where you can't ask for repetition, for example, when you're doing simultaneous, you can't ask for, you know, a repetition right away, because again, the information has to be delivered in real time and you don't have time to pause. So it's important for us to utilize and go into our tool belt and pick up other strategies that are going to help us remember the information a little bit more accurately and completely. Okay. All right. So before we move on to note taking, I want to do one more exercise with you guys. And then again, I'm going to have you, I'm going to share this with you. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys another picture. And this one is not words, it's actually going to be photos and pictures. And again, asking you to recall the information, okay? So again, here you have, there we go, okay. So here we have a set of pictures, right, that we have here. And again, we're going to utilize any strategy that you want. Again, you can't write it down, is the only thing that you can't write. And remember these, right, in the order. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to stare at these pictures, and let's see how many pictures you can recall from this list, okay? So again, I'm going to go ahead and set the timer, and I'm going to have you guys go ahead and start now. Remember, use any strategy that you want. You can repeat it, you can visualize it, associate something with it, put them in groups in your head. You can't write them down, again, no cheating. And let's see how many of these you can actually remember. Okay, 15 seconds. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? All right. So how many were you able to remember from that group of pictures there? Write it down, because I'm going to ask you guys on Friday when you guys meet with your language coaches, we're going to ask you how to repeat as many of those as you possibly could. Okay? So again, with the whole notion of not cheating, not writing it down, we're using our visual memory and strategies that will help us, you know, because again, there's times when we can't write the information down, it's coming too fast, and we have to be able to build that capacity for our brain to retain things long enough to be able to relay it. Okay? So again, write it down. How many would you be able to remember? Did you remember 5, 10, 15, all of them? I think there were 20 pictures in there, if I recall correctly. Okay? So again, think about that as another strategy. All right? And we'll do one last exercise in a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up this module here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back to our slide here in a minute. Let's see here. Let me go back and Let's get back onto our activity here. Okay. Oh, I went too far. One more ahead. Okay. So now we're going to talk about this last strategy here, which is note-taking. Okay. So again, with note-taking is another strategy that's going to help reinforce your memory. So when you have, you know, information at the doctor's office, again, just reassure the patient and provider that the notes that you are there or your notepad is only there for your, as a memory aid, and you will destroy any information that's written on those to preserve confidentiality at the end of the session. And sometimes I've had a couple of times when the patient asks me, hey, can I have that? And sure, it's their information. Unless it doesn't have anything else from any other patient, I have no problem giving it to the patient. Or I usually kind of, you know, rip it up in their presence, knowing that, hey, I'm not going to utilize this. And they're, for the most part, they're okay with it. As long as, again, I take the responsibility on myself to make sure that there's no identifying markers there, no patient names, no, you know, thing that if somebody else picks up that paper, then nobody would have to figure out what it is, right? Who it's talking about or what information is being relayed there. That's what we have to make sure we are careful with. And again, for those notes, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way to take notes. Remember, the notes are not for you to write paragraphs and sentences and all that, because again, it takes time, it's time consuming. And again, by the time if you're sitting there writing full sentences, you've already missed 4 or 5 things that already happened after that when you're on the first 2 words, because we're so focused on the actual writing piece of it that our mind is not able to focus on the actual information coming in, and we're going to lose it. Okay, so again, really encouraging is just, you know, very simple, quickly jot down an abbreviation, an acronym, the first letter, numbers. For me, I use notes to write down numbers because I have a tendency when I'm thinking really fast to transpose my numbers, and I want to make sure that I, you know, dosages, dates, all that, I want to make sure I get it correctly. So I usually tend to write those down more, you know, really quickly jot them down so I can just go back and refer to them, you know, later on. I do also write, you know, words, you know, a word here and there and abbreviate X, Y, and Z so that just when I look back at it, oh, I remember what that stands for. And that just kind of jots my memory so I don't forget it. Remember, use your fingers, count, whatever you have to do that, right, as a visual aid, okay? So for note taking, so one of the questions that I ask you is, how do you take your notes? For example, when you write on a piece of paper, which way, you know, how do you take your notes? Do you write from left to right? All right, so yeah, right, left to right. Along diagonal, do you go up and down? How do you write your notes? Think about that, okay? So again, I remember, like I said before, the goal is not to write full sentences. It's just you're writing key words, key thoughts, okay? Specific words, a unit, you know, like the diagnosis, or you know, hypertension diagnosis. So again, I'm not writing the patient was diagnosed with hypertension. I just put hypertension diagnosis. See, key thoughts versus, and that kind of brings together my whole sentence. So again, doing that is another way to do that. And again, I use symbols too. Maybe I write, you know, draw a picture of a heart. Diagnosis, I put DX on there. Okay, so again, so when I see the heart in the diagnosis, okay, heart, you know, heart diagnosis. It's very simple instead of writing the whole word out, which takes a little bit longer for me, okay? So again, for note taking, we want to get in the habit, or get out of the habit of writing from left to right. Note taking should be more of a checklist, of an itemized list, okay? So you write from top to bottom. Also too, like I said, our brains are very unique, that if we have a full page of paper, like a full sheet of paper in front of us, our tendency is to want to fill the whole page from left to right, fill every spot. So one strategy when we're taking notes is to minimize that space that we allow ourselves to write in. So one way that we suggest for people to do is to cut your paper in half. So something like this, right? So again, here now I have this area to write with versus here. Because here I'm going to have a tendency to want to fill the whole space up, right? And again, that's our brain. That's how our brain functions. So if I limit it, it's more like this, right? And this is more like a list, a to-do list. Think about it, because you notice those tablets that you have. If you notice reporters, when they're out in the field and they have it to capture them, they have this. They have a little notepad that's very small, maybe probably a quarter of this, because again, they want to limit it to the space and then just make it more of a list versus sentences, all right? Or symbols. So again, that's one strategy that you want to be able to utilize when you're writing your notes, is cut the surface in half. Trust me, that will help you a lot in doing so, okay? The other way to do that too is when you're taking your notes, I ask you to, what language do you take your notes in? Do you take them all in English? Do you take them half in your target language? and half in English, how do you take those notes? Okay, think about that. One of the things that's recommended is to try to keep the languages separate. So for example, if I'm taking notes, for example, the patient is speaking, they're speaking to me in Spanish, right? So again, if I have my notes are in Spanish, because that way when I go back and refer to them, my brain as an interpreter, I see the Spanish note, my brain is already looking for the English word so that I can convey it to the doctor now. So again, if that strategy works for you, again, try that. Because that is, remember, you're using two different tool sets, right? So then I write it in Spanish. When the doctor is speaking, I take the notes in English. So when I have to go back and refer to it, I can now look, my brain's gonna look for the equivalent in Spanish now, or in Russian or in Armenian. So again, that's one strategy that a lot of interpreters have said that has been beneficial. Some people say it's more confusing. So again, use whatever strategy, but we recommend try it at once and see if that improves it for you. Try keeping the languages separate, because again, our brain is very, easily gets confused. And many times when you've seen interpreters that they're interpreting and all of a sudden they stick in, for example, if I'm trying to find, I'm hearing it in Spanish and I have a tendency to work in both languages, when my brain cannot find the Spanish word that I need in Spanish, it's gonna find and fill it in so it doesn't leave a blank there, it's gonna fill in the English word. So my brain, without me noticing it, it already filled in the English word in there for me. And you notice that with a lot of interpreters, they're speaking, and they'll throw an English word in there, and they keep going in Spanish. And like, wait a second, why did a Spanish and English word just pop up in there? Because again, our brain is trying to fill in those gaps. So that's why you want to keep the languages separate. It's recommended that that way your brain doesn't get confused, doesn't fill in the right, the wrong word per se, when it has to fill in that information. So that's another strategy as well that you can utilize. And like I said, the last thing you can do is utilize those symbols, right? You guys have a worksheet that was uploaded in Moodle that has a list of words, and then it asks you to create your symbols, right? An association, whatever word, whatever symbol, it has meaning for you. For example, the word female. We all have a symbol that we can associate with it, right? Whether it's the girl with a little dress on, or the word F for female, M for mujer in Spanish or in Armenian, I don't know if the word is, and you can use this first letter. Again, as long as you keep those symbols separate and you know what that symbol represents. What does that mean? So you don't get yourself confused, right? Later on. So again, utilize those symbols to help you, again, shorten the information. Again, it's just to trigger a cue for you to remember the information that's associated with it. I don't know if you've ever seen a court reporter when they do the shorthand for recorders. It's just little squigglies, little lines that don't, geometric shapes that if you look at it, looks like, gibberish, basically. But all those gibberishes have meaning because each little squiggle has associated to a word, to a phrase. And that's how court reporters take, because there's no way they can sit there and type every single, I don't care how fast of a typer you are, you're not going to be able to keep up at the rate. And they don't usually ask for repetition. They just keep going, and then and they even have to read those statements back. So again, it's a skill that it takes years to hone in and be able to, same thing with note taking, that it acquires that. Okay, so again, and also too, when you have your notes, it's a good way to track new words. I always say bring carry a notepad with you all the time, because that's why if you encountered a word, and you're going to learn how to, if the doctor throws in a word that you're not familiar with, you can always refer it back to the expert, right, the doctor, and he can explain it to you. But you know what, I'm going to write that word down. I'm going to go look it up and know the meaning of it. And I'm also going to know how to translate that, or what is the equivalent in my language? Is there another equivalent? Is it said in many other words? And that's going to be encoded now in my long-term memory so that when I have to utilize it again, it's already there. So that's part of my homework. And this is how I build my vocabulary too. I jot down my own glossary of terms. So I'm creating as I learn new words, as I'm sitting there in the waiting room and I see a word, oh, how would I interpret that? How would I translate that? I write it down. I go, that's part of my homework, and I look it up. That's how I kind of kill time sometimes when I'm waiting there. So I'm not just kind of, but again, I use my environment to help me. Yeah, how would I say that? Or I heard a word, how would I say that? Write it down, or a phrase, and that's my way to also track down and keep those notes there. Okay. So again, we go back. So, I'm going to ask you, who remembers that list of words that I gave you guys in the beginning? Think about how many words can you remember now? Okay. Jot those down. How about those pictures? How many pictures can you remember now? So again, I've kind of let some time lapse now and see if you can go back and, can you use that strategy to try to remember those words or those pictures? All right, and again, I'll be interested to see the second time around when I ask you guys how much time lapse and how many you were able to remember. Okay, all right. So the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna give you guys another exercise before we wrap up here. So for this one though, I'm going to give you a list of words. And on this one, we're gonna do 2 exercises. The first one is you're gonna listen to me and you're gonna be able to just, without even listening, without no notes the first time, I just want you to listen to my list of words and see how many words you can remember, okay? When I ask you to write them down. All right? So go ahead and do that, okay? So this is my first, so for the first time around, okay, you're just gonna hear it and you're gonna, be able to not write it down and then repeat it, okay? So here we go. Drum, curtain, bell, coffee, school, parent, moon, garden, hat, farmer, nose, turkey, color, house, river. Okay, I'm gonna repeat it one more time. Again, remember, no cheating or writing it down. You're using your auditory skills to remember this. Drum, curtain, bell, coffee, school, parent, moon, garden, hat, farmer, nose, turkey, color, house, river. Okay. Take a minute and see how many words you remember. Write those down. Write the words down that you remembered. Okay. So again, we're utilizing our auditory memory. Again, using association, using visualization, grouping the words together, associating them, coding them, whatever way you have to do to remember the information. Okay, that's part of our memory skill development. So again, we have to, find what we feel comfortable with, what fits us, so we can go ahead and incorporate that into our everyday lives. And again, this is an ongoing process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen the first time you try it. It's taking different pieces of it and seeing what fits you, your style, your way of learning, and then utilizing that to your advantage. So remember, it's an aid to help you remember that information. Because again, the good thing is you don't have to remember for the long term, for the long haul. It's just in the moment when I'm in that session with that provider, I want to make sure that I retain all the information that's being said when I'm doing consecutive mode. Whatever the patient says in 1 or 2 sentences, I can hold on to that and then enough to be able to process it, convert it, and then relay it. Okay? And my goal is maybe I can go now, when I first start, maybe 1 or 2 sentences now, but the goal is to be able to go up to 3 or 4, because that's more of a natural conversation. Because we don't want to cut people off in mid-sentence or like, okay, 1 sentence, stop, because that's going to take forever. So again, you want to make it to be as fluid as possible, as if it were a natural conversation. And of course, in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit more, you're going to be more nervous and more hesitant. You have to maybe ask them to stop a little bit more. But the goal is here, if you're working on your strategy, you should be able to build up where you'll be able to retain a little bit more each time. Okay, and that's the goal of it. That's the goal of memory development, okay, is to do that. So again, think about that list of the last list that I gave you guys. And again, what are those words that how many you remembered, okay? The next one around, I'm gonna have you now, I'm gonna give you another list, but this time you can write it down, okay? So I'm gonna have you write the word down when you hear it, write it down. You can write the full word, you can write a symbol, whatever it is gonna take you guys to remember the information, okay? Here we go. All right. Desk, ranger, bird, shoe, stove, mountain, glasses, towel, cloud, boat, lamb, gun, pencil, church, fish. Okay, so you should have written those down. So you have the visual cue now, right? And you have the auditory cue as well. So this time you wrote it down, you either wrote the word down, wrote the first initial of it, you wrote a symbol or something to remember the information, okay? Now I want you to turn that paper over and see how many of those words you can recall now that you use both senses, your auditory and your visual, plus your writing skills down, right? Another sensory, your tactful, your tact. So how many words can you remember now from that list? I'll give you a minute or two to write them down. Okay. And you can test yourself a little bit later too to see how many words you actually can remember. But again, don't use a cheat sheet. Turn it over and see if you can actually jot your memory to get those words back out. But this time you had a visual cue and an auditory cue. So again, another way to encode information, which is what an interpreter does, right? You hear the doctor, the patient, you copy the information and you write your notes and then you repeat the information back. That's what you want to practice every day. So all these other things are helping you build to that point of being able to do that. All right. So again, you know, again, it's a lot of info coming in. It's a lot of things to try at once. But again, it's giving you, because we want to do, usually this module we do on day 2, but we wanted to switch it over because we don't have you guys here with us to give you this information on day 1 so that you can start incorporating that when we do the practicum on Friday. That you can start utilizing these strategies and not wait till week 2 to start doing them. But so we wanted to try it out and see if it makes a big difference and people are able to hone in from the get-go. Start using these strategies to help you build that reserve and see if that helps your ability to recall and retain information a little bit easier in the long run. Because again, that's the goal, is you want to build up to that and later on. Okay. All right. So a lot of information to hold on to. I know we gave you guys a lot today, and plus you have another couple more with the modules that you're going to be looking at, the CHIA standards. So again, you know, you have the week, review the information, review these recordings, go back. But again, we're just giving you guys, kind of setting the stage for you guys, giving you, you know, information of what we feel is important that's going to help build upon this for you guys. And then, you know, take that with it. And like I said, the internet's a very good place that has a lot of resources for you guys to be able to do that. And these drills, you know, practice. Practice, you know, listen to the news, record it, repeat it, record yourself repeating it, so you can check the accuracy of it. You know, have your kids make you a list and have you test you on them and use different strategies. So again, use your environment, because the more you practice it, the more it's going to feel natural and the more you'll be able to hone in and to really, you know, hone in that skill and being able to utilize it effectively when you have to, when you're in the field. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this session here. Hopefully you found it beneficial that you can incorporate that. We will have a time for discussion on Friday, like I said, when we meet again in the live Zoom session with your language coaches. But please, you know, try to incorporate these things that we talked about today to see if that helps you when you're doing your dialogues and in your practice runs moving forward. Okay. All right, everyone. So you guys have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you guys later on in the week for your practicum. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.